And so thank you. Welcome to everybody for coming. We are excited to have back Rabbi Dr. Shlomo Pereira. Thank you so much for joining us back. It was really insightful last talk we had, and I am excited for this one and the following one. And it's just a really immersive experience of what we have there, although obviously I do encourage you to go to Rabbi Pereira's classes as well, because that's a lot deeper. This is a surface immersive, and then you can definitely get a lot deeper with him, and I will send out his email address with the follow-up email, so you will definitely be able to follow up with him. But in the meantime, I want to get us started. I first want to say that it's a little bit of a crazy time, and that's an understatement in the world. Particularly where I am in Israel, and I do feel it necessary to call that out and to mention that there is deep stress, but yes, also deep hope. And I hope that we're entering this new year with hope, and that it will bring to us good and health and happiness and togetherness and unity, and make sure that we're all together. So thank you for joining again. A little bit of logistics. For the presentation itself, all cameras and microphones will be off, besides Rabbi Pereira, obviously. And if you have questions, feel free to throw them either into the chat or the Q&A. I'll be monitoring. In general, I will wait till the end to ask them. If there's something urgent, I will break in the middle. So please do put in, if you missed something or something, just there was a word there you didn't understand, please do just put it in, because I'll make sure to break in and interrupt. But in general, we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. And that's it. Chat, Q&A, and I will hand it over. Have a Shana Tova. I will come back at the end and say the same. We are happy. I'm going to give a brief introduction because there's a lot to say. But Rabbi Dr. Shlomo Pereira is the Director of Adult Education at the Chabad of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. I did that backwards. He is the author or co-author of Jewish Ethics from Portugal and a few other books. So it's interesting to look at them. They're in English, they're in Portuguese. So those who are coming from a Portuguese-speaking country, please note that there is background to it, and he will have to tell you how to get a hold of the books. Last time, I know you were able to give us PDFs so we can forward them. You can decide how to do that, and I'll let Rabbi Pereira mention that from the end. He is widely published in lectures around the world on history of Jews from the Iberian Peninsula and the Sephardic world. And that's what we're going to hear today, but in the context of Rosh HaShanah. So I'm handing it over to you. Thank you again, and continue putting your comments and questions in the chats and Q&A.
Okay, so thank you very much. It's a delight to be back to talk to this group. And today we are going to be talking about things a little bit different than usual, let's say, in the sense that we're going to be talking about Rosh Hashanah, predictably enough. And the talk will cover two different aspects. On one hand, we will want to think a little bit about the universal meanings of Rosh Hashanah. At the same time, we want to share some of the Sephardic perspectives on this. Hopefully, I'll have time to share two interesting stories, historical stories about this. And then at the end, I want to share with you something that I think it's very unique about the Sephardic tradition, which is a Rosh HaShanah Seder. Of course, we are used to the Seder for Pesach, for Passover, but this is a very interesting, a very unique experience. So starting with the universal meanings of Rosh Hashanah, the basic commandments that we have in the Torah tell us that this is a time of remembrance and of blowing the shofar. So it's a very fundamental concept, this idea of blowing the shofar, the ram's horn. And the Talmudic sources elaborate on these, bringing the idea that connected to the blowing of the shofar is the fact that this is a day of judgment. So it's a day in which God is judging all creatures. And so from that perspective, we are passing as if it were in front of God, and will be inscribed in the book of life, or the book of not so good life, depending on the circumstances. So it's this idea of blowing the shofar, this idea of judgment. There is another dimension that is very interesting, and that is the fact that the first of Tishrei, which is Rosh HaShanah, is understood in our tradition as being the birthday of humanity. Mind you, not the birthday of the world. The birthday of the world would have been on the 25th of Elul, but this is the birthday of humanity. And that is a very significant point, because what it's telling us is that this is the beginning of this world as God created it for its ultimate purpose, which is to have human beings here that will make this world into a godly, good place, a godly place, and will allow us eventually to go from an initial Garden of Eden, where everything was wonderful, and then not so much, and all the way to the Messianic prophecies that will bring all the abundance and all the peace and tranquility and so forth back. So the point is that since it's the birthday of humanity, like with any other birthday, it's a time of reflection. It's a time in which we are encouraged to think, we are encouraged to contemplate to what extent we are being all we can be, to what extent we are fulfilling our mission, whatever the mission may be in this world. And now, since we have not only just an individual mission, but a mission as a humanity, that is, again, to bring the world to a state that is welcoming of godliness, and what is referred to in Jewish mysticism as the Dira Betachtonim, meaning making a dwelling place for God in the lower realms, in these lower material realms. And so we want to know if we are using all the tools that we have at our disposal to fulfill our mission, individual and collective. And so if we are pushing the world in the right direction, again, both personally and just in general as well. And in all of these, the ultimate question that we are asking is, how good is our connection with the divine? How good is our connection with our mission, with all the tools, and therefore with the divine? So we have sort of framing Rosh HaShanah as the head of the year. And mind you, although we usually refer to it as the new year, the Jewish New Year, that's not what the words mean. It's Rosh HaShanah is the head of the year. And this is a very powerful idea, because the head basically controls the rest of the body. So the same way, what we are saying is that the way we understand Rosh HaShanah, the way we behave, the way we contemplate, the way we introspect, all the energies that we are creating on Rosh HaShanah, they will percolate throughout the rest of the year. That's what it means to be the head of. It will influence everything else. So what we are doing is, again, understanding that we are being judged. And because of that, we have to introspect, and we have to sort of judge ourselves and see exactly where we are in terms of our mission, in terms of the tools at our disposal. As a parenthesis here, this is not necessarily related to what I want to talk about, but this idea that we are under scrutiny, that we bring upon ourselves for Rosh HaShanah, it's a feeling that I think most of us, if not all of us, have, that we've had that feeling throughout the year, right? Through the last year, we've been in the scrutiny all the time. So in a way, sort of as a personal reflection, it is almost as if after being in the eyes of the whole world with all the judgment, all the misconceptions, with everything, it's almost feels safer to just being judged by the true judge that actually knows what's going on and it's not going to manipulate the truth and things of that nature. So it's a little bit of a reversal of the normal circumstances in which we go through the year without thinking too much about it, and then Rosh Hashanah, we think about it. This is exactly the opposite. Most of us have been the whole year concerned with these different issues. Now, so essentially, if we were to summarize the essence of Rosh Hashanah in one word, we would say that we are celebrating accountability. We are celebrating accountability to ourselves and to God. Now, the key concept in this process of accountability is a word that is the word teshuvah, and that's a word that is usually translated as repentance. And unfortunately, there's a lot lost in translation. Teshuvah is very different than repentance, at least the way we understand it in English. And the whole idea of what teshuvah is, to understand that, we have to just go back a little bit and try to understand what are the tools that we have, what are the tools that God gave us, what are the tools that the Torah gives us in order to affect the world around us. And the tools are the mitzvot, are the commandments. Now, the commandments, again, that's another word that we use and we understand, but commandments is not really the best translation of mitzvot. Mitzvot have much more a function of connectors. It's something that connects us with God, much more than an obligation. The obligation is a functional aspect of the mitzvot, but the essential aspect of the mitzvot is a connection. So if you want, you can think about the mitzvot as having these dual characteristics, a functional characteristic. So if you're saying that you have to say a blessing, well, that's a functional idea. But at the same time, there is the essential part of it, which is it's connecting us to God. And without getting too much into very esoterical views of things, the mitzvot is the answer in Judaism to the very serious theological question of how do we connect a finite human being with an infinite God? A finite and an infinite, basically by definition, are not compatible. They are in two different realms. And so how do you connect the two? And the answer is through the commandments. That's what connects the two. Pretty much the same way that if you have somebody, let's say in an army, that is a very high-level general, and you have filed the lowest possible echelons, one does not have anything to do with the other. There is no possible connection unless gives the soldier an order. And if the general tells the soldier, okay, go fetch this map or go check the
Oh, I think we lost Rabbi Pereira. Okay, I apologize for that. I hope that you've been enjoying it until now. Something must have happened on his end in his internet. We know that technology is wonderful until it isn't. So give me a moment to follow up and see if we can't get him back on. Sorry about this. Oh, perfect. Now you're on mute. Wait, you're on mute.
Okay, so I'm back. I'm sorry, it's never happened to me. Maybe there was something I said, but I don't know.
No, I'm sure that wasn't it.
So, let's see exactly where I was. Well, first of all, I need to go back to sharing the screen.
Yes, let's make sure that works. Thank you all for your patience. It happens, we all know. Perfect. Okay.
So, where I was, and again, I'm not completely sure where you lost me or I lost you, is that our tools to affect the world around us are the mitzvot. And the mitzvot, aside from the functional aspect that they have, they will also have, they have essentially a fundamental aspect that is connect us with the divine. And the comparison that I was giving is that if you have a general and a soldier, rank and file, you don't have any connection between the two because they are in different realms of existence, so to speak. And the only way to connect them is when the general gives an order to the subordinate and tells it, go do X, Y, and Z. And so, of course, there is an order that has a functional aspect, but there is also the essential part of it. There is a connection that was established that otherwise would not have been established. And the mitzvot, the etymological root of the word mitzvot is exactly that. It's a tafta, it's a connection. That's what it means, the words mitzvot. And if the mitzvot is a connection, then a transgression or a not performance of the mitzvot is a disruption of that connection. It breaks that connection. And so the essence of teshuvah is reconnecting. So the essence of teshuvah is go back to a pristine or as pristine as possible connection that we had with God before we broke it. And this is no difference, incidentally, from a relationship with our friends, with our family, with our spouses, and so forth. There is always in the connection some functional aspects, there are some essential aspects. And we know that sometimes we break that connection, and the process transcends the utilitarian aspects of it. It's really reconnecting and going back to a pristine type of connection that is fundamental. So mitzvot are connectors, transgressions are disruptors, and teshuvah is a process of reconnect, is a process of returning to the pristine form of our relationship. And notice that while at a very basic level, while when we think about repentance is about rejecting the past. Teshuvah is exactly the opposite. It's about embracing the pristine past, is to go back to that pristine past. And so the whole idea is to return to the connection, to reconnect, to recognize that we broke the connection and reconnect. Because of that, there are different steps, and there are many pieces of information in this PowerPoint that I will not be talking about, and I'll be more than happy to share the PowerPoint with whoever wants it afterwards. But this is just a way of saying that this process of teshuvah, on one hand, it implies recognition of a mistake, it implies a regret of a mistake, but is much more than that. It implies that the mistake has stopped, it's a cessation of the transgression, implies a confession, a verbal confession, private but verbal, and it requires a commitment not to do it again. So the teshuvah, while teshuvah is much more geared towards, let us say, the other person. If I did something wrong to the other person, is geared to the other person. While repentance is something that is much more introspective, just for us. I mean, I regret it. Well, with teshuvah, you have to regret, yes, but you cannot continue doing it. You have to repair it, and you have to acknowledge to the other person, and you have to be committed not to do it again. So it transcends you. Now, why is this so important? Well, first of all, to have the idea that when we talk about teshuvah and we translate it with repentance, that is not, we are shortchanging the concept of teshuvah, that is return, reconnect. But at the same time, because this connects directly with the call of the shofar. So if teshuvah is probably the word of the day for Rosh HaShanah, the object of the day is the shofar, is the ram's horn that we blow on Rosh HaShanah. And Maimonides tells us that the purpose of the shofar, the purpose is to awake us, to take us from our slumber and from our sleep, as if it were, and examine our deeds, return in repentance, return again, and remember our Creator. So the shofar in this context is the instrument to call our attention, to wake us up for what we need to do. It's almost an alarm clock of some sorts, but it's supposed to stir our emotions, and it does with the different sounds. So shofar, a call for teshuvah, a call for reconnecting with God. And here that's where I think things get very interesting, because the shofar itself gives us very interesting messages. The design of the shofar, what a shofar is. And these are issues that are matters of Jewish law. If the shofar does not satisfy these conditions, it's not a kosher shofar. And yet they have very profound meanings in terms of how we understand this process of making amends and reconnecting with God. So the first thing is that the shofar has to be curved. If the shofar is straight, it's not kosher. So it has to be curved. And the curvature, it's almost a reflection of our curved backs, right? We are sort of humbled, and it's a sign of humble humility. It's a sign of submission in a good sense of the word. And that's the starting point. When we are being judged, when we recognize our mistakes, the starting point has to be humility. Has to be, well, I'm submitting because I realized that I just didn't do the right thing. The second aspect is that a shofar cannot have any type of decorations. Like it's very often we see shofars that have like silver, silver linings of some sort, and that makes them not kosher for a variety of reasons. But the point is that the shofar has to be natural. We are coming to God with ourselves. It's just the authentic me. It's not the me with all the trappings. It's the authentic, the simple me. It's just me, without the most natural form possible. The shofar has to be hollow inside. Well, being hollow inside, in this case, our sages tell us, is a symbolism for being open to change. We are open to change. If we are not open to change, then there is no way that we can do the teshuvah. Now, while it's true that the shofar is hollow inside, it has to be very sturdy. It's very rigid in the exterior. So, yes, we have to be open to change. Yes, we have to be humble. On the other hand, we have to be persistent. We have to be resilient. We have to be persistent in this quest, because it's very possible that we cannot fix all the problems in one go. We have to persist. There are a couple of other interesting symbolic messages, but I want just to finish with one that I think it's particularly informative and particularly empowering, I would say. And this characteristic may start with what will sound like a silly question. So you have a shofar, okay? We know we blow the shofar from this side, the narrow side. Now, let us say that I want to be bold and I blow the shofar. I want to blow the shofar through this side, the big side. Is it kosher? Is it acceptable? Now, never mind that you would not be able to, because it would be way too difficult. But let us say that we are, that we are able to. Would it be acceptable to use this this big part of the shofar, or we have to use the small one for the blow to be kosher? And the answer is you have to use the small one. The big one is not. And the reason is very simple. If we use the big one, we may have to put an enormous amount of effort, and there is going to be a little tiny amount of noise coming out of it. A lot of effort, not a lot of benefits from it, so to speak. On the other hand, if you use the small part, it's a little effort that is amplified and yields great benefits. So what is the message that our tradition wants to tell? What is the message that the Torah wants to tell us, that God wants to tell us? Is that in the process of reconnecting, in the process of correcting the wrongs, a little effort goes a long way. A little effort goes a long way. God forbid it should be, we put a lot of effort for nothing, or for almost nothing. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense with our children, with our family. What we want is for them to start trying. If they start trying, the thing will amplify itself, and suddenly we'll have a life of its own, and we reconnect. So again, God is not demanding from us an enormous effort that it's going to yield small results. Quite the opposite. He's asking for us a very small effort that will be amplified and yield very large results. So these are some of the universal reflections about Rosh Hashanah. And again, the main message would be that it's all about connecting with other people. It's all about connecting with God, of course, but also connecting with our fellow Jews, our fellow human beings. And it's all a matter of connecting, and it's all a matter of relationship. It's all a matter of understanding that the mitzvot are connectors and transgressions are disruptors. And therefore, the whole process of teshuvah is about reconnecting. It's about getting back to a pristine relationship. The second part that I want to share with you is some two Sephardic stories, and these are actually historical stories. They are real stories. And the first one is a story that is dated, well, presumably dated to September 5th of 1497, and at the lack of a better name, I call it a blast from the past. So September 5th was the first of Tishrei, so it was Rosh HaShanah. And the story is that at this time, there was a fair number of people in Barcelona who were conversos. So these are people that have been, one way or another, forced into conversion to Christianity, Jews, of course. In Spain, unfortunately, this is something that was happening already for quite some time. The big, massive conversions by force of Jews to Christianity started in 1391. So started, and of course, picked up speed and momentum with the disputation of Tortosa, also in Catalonia, in 1412. And then, obviously, in 1492, with the decree of expulsion, even more. So apparently there was someone, a Jewish person, who became known by the name of Don Fernando Aguilar. Became his secular name, his Christian name, let's say, who was a very influential Jew, a very important person, who, when 1492 came and the Jews were faced with the choice of either you leave or you convert, he, like many others, not most, but many others, decided to stay. So it was not, of course, his first choice, but so he decided to stay, and he, like many others, just because overnight you're told that now you're a Christian doesn't mean that you know the first thing about Christianity, first. And second, all you know is about Judaism, and that's what you want to do. I mean, you're just maybe you want to keep your position, you keep your wealth, you keep whatever, but what you know how to do is Judaism, and what you do not know what to do is Christianity. So the point is that many of these people that stayed behind, they went out of the way to keep Judaism in whatever way they could. Of course, it's not exactly an open form of Judaism, but in any way they could. And the more open the Jewish observances are, the more difficult it was for people to observe them. So, for example, the blowing of the shofar. This is a very loud thing. I mean, there is no way of doing it discreetly, right? So that was one of the things that became very difficult to do. One of the several things that was very difficult to do. Now, it turns out that, according to the story, this Don Fernando Aguilar was a musician. He was a conductor, orchestra conductor, and he was working for the crown, and not only for the crown, but then working for the church as well, because that's pretty much who was sponsoring the arts at that time. And there are some variations of the story, but the punchline is that a special concert, was scheduled for Barcelona for September 5th, 1497, which was the first night of Rosh HaShanah. And Don Fernando Aguilar, he decided that, he suggested that he's going to write a new composition for his orchestra. This was not unusual at all at the time, to keep on writing new compositions for different events. And he said, so he'll write a new composition, and he decides, I'm going to write something that is going to, probably now we would call it world music. World music in the sense that it will bring sounds from all over the world, different instruments from all over the world. That's going to be the unique thing. Now, what he was trying to do, and what he did, was, in the middle of the composition, one of the exotic instruments that was played was a shofar, was a ram's horn. And so he was able to play the different sounds as it's prescribed by our tradition, and at least at that time go reasonably unnoticed what he was doing. And so he had the ingenuity, apparently, of being able to observe this mitzvah of blowing the shofar under very unique circumstances, very unlike circumstances. It's interesting, like a footnote on this story, that in the year 2004, the chief rabbi of Israel, Yonah Metzger, he was appointed by the Spanish authorities to sort of coordinate the celebration of the 8th century, 800 years of the death of Maimonides. Maimonides he died in 1204, and so 2004 was 800 years. And he went to Spain, and he was received, Rabbi Metzger was received by the king. At that time was King Juan Carlos, and he offered the king a shofar. And the king had no idea what the shofar was. And so Rabbi Metzger said, okay, I'm going to tell you what it is. It's a ritual instrument and so forth. And he told the king this story. And I don't know if it was out of politeness or not, but the king said that that this would be probably one of the most precious presents that he had in his collection of the things that the crown had been given, as gifts. So now, one question, of course, you may ask is, how true is this story? I'm going to leave that to you. I'm just going to say that, from my perspective, this story reflects more the mentality of the people that were subjugated to do things that they didn't want, and how ingenious and how persistent they were in trying to do the right thing against all the odds. That for me is more important than the details of this story. I mean, if you are into musicology, you will tell me, well, there were really no orchestras at that time. Okay, so I mean, the concept is more recent. Even the concept of conductor, it's not obvious that there was a conductor, a notion of conductor at that time. So, but again, that's irrelevant. What is important is what this symbolizes, what this story symbolizes, is going out of the way to do the right thing, even in very difficult circumstances. The second story is a little bit closer to home, in the sense that it tells the story of 23 Jews. 23 Jews that were descendants of the Portuguese and Spanish conversos. So these are people that are descendants of the Jews that were either expelled or converted or both in the last decade of the 1400s, so between 1492 and 1497 in the Iberian Peninsula. And many of them left. Of course, they fled the Iberian Peninsula. Many went to Italy, many went to the Ottoman Empire. Turkey at that time was a wonderful country for the Jews, nice times. And many ended up, as time went by, going to England and going to Holland. And at the earlier stages, let's say, throughout the 1500s, so for the first 7, 8 decades after the expulsion, most Jews were going to Italy and the Ottoman Empire. But then progressively, for a variety of reasons, progressively it started going to Holland, to the Netherlands. It was to England, but in particular the Netherlands. And there were no Netherlands at the time. It was a little bit different from what is now. But that general area that included the Flemish country, Flanders. And it so happens that some Portuguese Jews, refugees from Portugal, they ended up in Amsterdam. Many ended up in Amsterdam. Now, it so happens also that from the year 1580, starting in the year 1580, the kingdoms of Spain, Castile, and so forth, they actually, let's say, they took over Portugal. So what it means is that Portugal was under Spanish control for a period of time, relatively short, but was about 60 years. And one of the things that was going on at the time, and is going a lot into history, but this is very important to see the connection. What was going on at the time was that Spain and Holland, the Netherlands, they were in the middle of a war, a big war, okay? Now, because Spain is now taking over Portugal, Portugal is dependent on Spain, is a subjugated kingdom of Spain, then Portugal becomes an enemy of Holland as well. So what the Dutch do, among other things, is they attack the Portuguese possessions, the Portuguese colonies in Latin America. So they, of course, the Dutch already had a presence in Latin America, but now basically they went into Brazil. And this starts the period of the so-called the Dutch Brazil, the period of the Dutch Brazil. So a lot of these Jews that had fled Portugal and went to Amsterdam, now they go from Amsterdam and they go to New York. I'm sorry, they go to Brazil, right? Because Brazil now is under the same jurisdiction. And Lord behold, after a while, the Portuguese got back their independence. And after getting back the independence, the next thing they are going to do is what? Is get back to Brazil and try to reconquer the colonies, including Brazil. And that was accomplished in 1654. So by 1654, Brazil was again in the hands of the Portuguese authorities, and therefore under the auspices of the Inquisition as well. So at that time, the Jews that had left Portugal, that had settled in Amsterdam, and then from Amsterdam, we went to Brazil. Now they were stuck again under the tentacles of the Inquisition. So what's going to happen? Well, they had to flee, many of them, and that was very heartbreaking because not everybody was allowed to leave, but that's a different conversation. And so they left in a couple of boats, a couple of vessels. Some of the vessels were attacked by pirates. We know that when everything was said and done, the vessels that were supposed to go back to Amsterdam were not able to make it back to Amsterdam. They were attacked again by pirates, and some of them, just some of the people, were taken in one of those vessels to the closest that existed in that area to Holland, to Amsterdam, which was New Amsterdam. New Amsterdam. So this is New York. Now, New York. So you have 23 Jews from Brazil, from Recife, that, and of course before from Portugal, that arrive in New Amsterdam.
Just 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Arrive in New Amsterdam. This is a few days before Rosh HaShanah, and there is the connection. It's like 3-4 days before Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah was on September 12th, 1654. So you have a group of people now, it's 23 of them. We have 6 women, 4 men and 10 children. And that's the best understanding. Some of them were taken as captives because they didn't have the money to pay the captains of the ship and so forth. So some of them disembarked and went into captivity immediately, which is actually why we know the names of some of them. And you can wonder what these 23 people, 23 Jews were thinking. I mean, I'm sure on one hand that this is a new world, this is a new possibility, this is maybe the opportunity for a wonderful life. On the other hand, we are running away. This is nothing. And what is the new year going to bring for us? Is the new year going to bring for us a book of life? Is the new year going to bring for us other alternatives? So it must have been an incredibly trying period, especially again with part of them having been arrested. And we know that a couple of days after they arrived, so a few days after Rosh Hashanah, the governor of New York, New Amsterdam, complained bitterly against their presence because they were poor and they were downtrodden and they were just creating trouble. And of course, he was an anti-Semite himself. So anyway, so what is the point here? The point is that the first Jews as a group that settled in the United States, well, would become the United States, arrived a couple of days before Rosh Hashanah on the year 1654. They were 23 Jews originally from Portugal, in terms of the families, that made it through Holland and through Brazil to the United States. And so the beginning of established Jewish presence, a continued Jewish presence in the United States, started on Rosh Hashanah of 1654 with a bunch of Portuguese Jews, 23 of them. Now, unfortunately, I have just not more than 2 or 3 minutes to go through what is a very unique Sephardic celebration. So I'm just hoping that you will be interested in getting the PowerPoint so that you can see all the details.
Well, let's take a 5 minutes, even 5-6 minutes. Just it's important if it's okay.
Okay. So the other Seder, of course, when we think about Seder, we think about Passover. It happens that in the Sephardic tradition, there is another Seder, which is a Rosh HaShanah Seder. And we can ask, where does that come from? Well, believe it or not, actually, that comes straight from the Talmud. There is a very interesting passage in the Talmud that says that on Rosh Hashanah, you should eat a certain number of foods because they reflect they are signs. They are omens, they are indications, they are good signs for the new year. So you have leeks and dates and so forth. And of course, everybody knows that, even in the Ashkenazic world, that you still have the apple and the honey. Yes, except that apple and honey was a part of a much bigger process, much bigger Seder, and that is what is left in the Ashkenazic tradition. But in the Sephardic tradition, most communities adopted the custom of doing this Seder. That is a much more elaborate, although not nearly as long as the Passover Seder. So it's a very beautiful ceremony that essentially, this that I'm showing you is mostly the Portuguese and Spanish version, as it is done today in the Portuguese and Spanish congregations, namely Sheharit Israel and others in the United States. And you have these 7 types of fruits that are signs for a good year. You have dates, leeks, beets, gourd, pomegranate, and apple and honey, and the head of a fish, mostly. And there is such a thing as a Rosh HaShanah Seder plate, where you put all these things, and you can see it's reminiscent of the Passover Seder plate. And the thing that is interesting, and I'm just going to use one of 2 of them to illustrate, is that each of the fruits, the word in Hebrew has a meaning that lends itself to understand that siman, that omen, that indication. So, for example, the tamarim, that is dates, okay? They are related to a word that is tam, that reflects the end. So there is a passage here that says, may it be your will, so yehi ratzon, may it be your will, Lord our God, the God of our fathers, that there come an end to our enemies, haters, and those who wish evil upon us, which is very appropriate. But again, it's playing with the word, the root of the word for tamarim, the tam. I have here also something that I find very interesting, which is okay. Part of the fun of this Seder is the fact that we play with words. This is all about playing with words. Of course, this is playing with words in Hebrew. But you can, and there's no reason why you wouldn't, play with words in other languages. So in my own family, one of the biggest delights about Rosh Hashanah is about how incredibly corny all these sayings are, because they are supposed to play with words and explore the meanings. So, for example, this that I have here this is taken from the Rosh Hashanah Seder from the Portuguese and Spanish synagogue in New York, Sheharit Israel. And for dates, this is what you say in English. As we eat this date, may we date the new year that is beginning as one in happiness of blessing and peace for all. Okay, so again, it's playing with words. Then, of course, you do that. You have the same patterns with all the other. This one is probably one of my favorites in terms of corniness, and that is the leeks that are the word is karti, that is again the same shorish, the same root as karet, that is to cut down. So the original translated says, "May it be your will, Lord our God, God of our fathers, that our enemies, okay, the haters and those who wish us it, they shall be cut down." Again, very timely. Also, should be cut down because it's the word. It's the same word that gets highlighted in yellow. And again, in the Portuguese and Spanish tradition, this is the epitome of corniness. It says, like we eat this leek, may our luck never lack in the year to come. So playing with words. And you have, again, the same with beats. As we bite this beat, may those who in the past have beaten us and saw this arm beat to cover in the coming year. So it's one of those. I love it because it's sort of daddy jokes. But, and of course, then you have the gourd and you have the pomegranate and you have the proverbial apple and honey. And then the last one is the fish's head. And again, with all of these 7 things, there is some beautiful omens, beautiful implications from all of this. So again, the fish head, Rosh HaShanah is the head of the year. So let us be these head that is a proper head, that actually can influence properly the rest of the year. Okay, so for all the obvious reasons, I want just to wrap things up a little bit, but I want to leave you with a parting thought that is, I think it's very important. In general, it's probably even more important nowadays with everything that's going on. What is the attitude that we need to have when we enter Rosh HaShanah? Well, we made the point before that attitude is an attitude of humility. Okay? So the question is, what are we going to gain from the whole process? What are we supposed to gain from the whole process that starts on Rosh HaShanah? That we reconnect with God, then we have Yom Kippur, then you have Sukkot, then you have Simchat Torah, and all the things. What are we supposed to get out of it? So everything starts with the shofar, but where does it end? So, and this is the interesting thing. The shofar, we argued before, and it's well known, that if the shofar is straight, it's not kosher, it has to be bent. Now, interestingly enough, the lulav, that is the object of Sukkot, that it's the end of the process, it's exactly the opposite. If the lulav is bent, it's not kosher. The lulav has to be completely straight. So we start with something that has to be bent, could not be straight, and we end up with something that is straight and could not be bent. And this is a very powerful thought, because we are supposed to start with humility, but we have to end with determination. We have to end with strength. We have to end upright, very strong of who we are, of what our role is, and very comfortable in our skin. Mind you, not arrogant, God forbid, but the opposite of humility is confidence, is knowing what we can do, knowing what our obligations are, knowing what our capacities are, and therefore we may start humble, but we have to finish determined with great strength to pursue our life as Jews. And I would stop here.
Thank you so much. You're right. There was a lot in there, so we appreciate that we can look back at it afterwards. But let's kind of recap a little to remind everybody. And please do put into the chat your questions or comments, and I will invite you to come back as a presenter. Please know that doesn't mean you're presenting. That just means that we encourage you to open your camera and microphone. And can you just turn off the slideshow, please? And first question is more, oh, sorry, I said I was going to recap first. So we talked first about the Rosh Hashanah in general, and then we spoke about the historical, 2 historical stories that happened around Rosh Hashanah, and then we went into the Seder. So thank you, just to remind everybody, because I know there was very much a lot there. So the first question is, should a Jew think of teshuvah at times other than Rosh Hashanah? So that's...
Yeah. So look, this is almost the same thing as asking, should I be nice to my wife only on her birthday or only on my wedding anniversary? And the answer is, well, the wedding anniversary is one of those that is a very propitious time for me to be nice, right? But on the other hand, doesn't mean that I shouldn't be nice the rest of the year. So the idea is that, yes, teshuvah, we are supposed to do teshuvah. We can do it anytime. Now, there is a propitious time for a lot of theological reasons that are irrelevant for the moment. There is a propitious time that is this time of the month of Elul, and then the Rosh HaShanah and Yom Kippur. So what that means is that there is a little bit more of a syntony, as if it were. There is more receptiveness, as if it were, from the perspective of the other part to accept the reconnection. But that's what it means. And incidentally, this is true with everything else. So, for example, we are supposed, before Yom Kippur, we are supposed to ask forgiveness from other people for whatever we might have done not so nice. Now, do we have to wait for Yom Kippur? No. Now, but if for whatever reason we didn't do it before, Yom Kippur is a good time because we are going to ask God to forgive us. And so if somebody comes to us and asks us to forgive, and we don't forgive, and then we expect God to forgive us. So it's a propitious time, but that doesn't mean that we cannot do it other times. On Purim, we are supposed to be happy. That doesn't mean that we should be gloomy the rest of the time. It's just a very propitious time for that. So, and incidentally, the holidays, the term that is used for the festivals in Hebrew is Moadim, right? Moadim. Moadim means encounters. We encounter those energies. We encounter that special characteristic of that time that makes it propitious for certain things. But everything is open to us all the time. Yeah.
Thank you. And I do encourage everybody, so we see who's with us. If you want to open your cameras, please do. I'm inviting you. Thank you. And then there was a question, if a propitious time is also during Yom Kippur Katan, which might be a little beyond the scope of this, but
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the beginning of the question.
Oh, if a propitious time is also during Yom Kippur Katan.
Well, it's always propitious. Again, the idea of repentance, the idea of teshuvah. Again, let me answer in a way that that is a little silly. I like to be silly to make my point. Look, if I notice that I did something that is not appropriate, that it was annoying to my wife, I mean, I can wait, but why should I wait? I mean, that doesn't make sense. So I should do it immediately. We should. If we care about the relationship, we're going to try to fix it as soon as we know. Now, it may very well be that I'm so occupied with my life and all those other things that I don't even notice that I was aggravating my wife, you know? So in that case, now there is a moment that I can pause and try to think a little bit more about these things and make a little bit more of a the accountability, trying to think a little bit more about my track record on this. So if you want, it tells me this is a moment that it's telling me, stop, think about this specific issue and what you need to do. But if you care about a relationship, you're going to be paying attention. And the moment you notice that there is a problem, you immediately deal with it. So all times are good, regardless.
Thank you. Do we know how they celebrated the 23, how they celebrated the first Rosh Hashanah in New Amsterdam, New York?
The answer is we don't, and I doubt that they did a lot of celebration. I mean, it must have been a very trying time, right? Because, I mean, you are in a new world, and we know that the story ends well, meaning the Jewish presence in America evolves in a very favorable manner. But there is no way they would know that. And they have in their families a history of persecutions. they are now being kicked out of Brazil or trying to leave. We don't know how many of the different peoples were, the 23 people were families. But what we know is that the families were broken in northern Brazil, in Recife, in Pernambuco, in those areas. Why? Because the people that were, the Jews that were allowed to leave without being clandestine, they were allowed to leave, were people that were never baptized. So, for example, if you have a couple that was baptized in Portugal, and officially Christian, and then ran away to Brazil, to Amsterdam, and then to Brazil, they were officially Catholic, so they couldn't leave. But their children were never baptized because they were maybe born in Holland or in Brazil. They could go as they are not Christians. And this explains why you have a group of 23 people and 13 of them are children. It was much easier for the children to go than the others. So I cannot think about these being. I think the whole experience that they were going through was so intense that probably that was more powerful in terms of eliciting repentance and eliciting proper thoughts of connecting with God than all the rituals that we have. And it's certainly the case. They didn't have a community. They didn't have a synagogue there. It took another 100 years or so before there was a synagogue there. It's not as if they had apples and honey. And it's not as if, again, part of them were arrested almost immediately. So some of them were captive in New Amsterdam. So this could not have been easy. And the answer is we don't know at all what they did. I doubt that they did much in terms of the rituals. They were not in a position to do much.
Thank you. I just want to comment. I know we're going a little bit over, so those who want to stay, please do. There's at least one more question I see. And Rabbi Pereira said that would be okay to go a few minutes over. Sure. But you will get with the recording also, so if you miss it now, you'll be able to see it then. The question I see is, can you relate to Rosh Hashanah as the birthday of humanity rather than the birthday of the world? Or maybe focus in on that.
Well, in our tradition, the Rosh Hashanah is the birthday of humanity, not the world, is a birthday of humanity. There is a big discussion in the Talmud about these, and there is a difference of opinion, which is typical of Talmudic discussions. There is a difference of opinion about when was the beginning of the world and the humanity. Okay, beginning of the world, and then 6 days after is beginning of humanity. So and the two opinions are that it was the month of Tishrei, and therefore the first of Tishrei is the creation of humanity, and therefore the 25th of Elul is the creation of the world. The other opinion is that this is in Nisan, is the month of Nisan. So the first of Nisan is the beginning, is the creation of humanity, and therefore, if you go back to Adar, it would be the 25th of Adar. That would be the creation of the world. And it's interesting how, in a very subtle way, these argument both agreed that it was either the first of Tishrei or first of Adar. But this argument then percolates also into a discussion of what is the time that is the most propitious for the final redemption. What is the time that is the most propitious? Is it the time around Pesach, it's Nisan, or the time around Rosh Hashanah, and then Yom Kippur and so forth? And notice that we end the Yom Kippur liturgy exactly the same way we end the Passover Seder. L'Shana Abba B'Yerushalayim. And that is exactly from this discussion in the Talmud that you have this difference of opinion, and we kept it. We kept that difference of opinion, reflecting the two Shana Abba B'Yerushalayim. Again, this is one of those we should wish L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, every day. I mean, actually, we shouldn't wish next year, should be tomorrow, if only the airlines were a little bit nicer and the prices a little bit more affordable. So again, the fact that we are talking about the birthday of humanity also makes it's a very important idea, more than the world, because the world was created for the sake of humanity. Okay, this is anthropomorphic or anthropocentered arrogance, I guess, but that's the way it is. So the world was created for the sake of human beings. And so the human beings are the pinnacle of creation, and the human beings are the only ones that have the free will that can transform the world into ultimately a dira betachtonim, a place of goodness and a place of godliness and so forth. So humans obviously play a central role in all of this. It's probably important to say that also there's a passage of the Talmud that addresses this issue, that we shouldn't think that just because humanity is the pinnacle of creation, humanity is why creation exists, that shouldn't give us a lot of sense of arrogance. Because when we think about we are so special that the whole world was created for us, then we should also think that the most smallest, the most irrelevant animal, the most irrelevant maggot was created before us and was around already before us. So we were not the first. We might have been the pinnacle, but there was a lot of creation before us. Now, again, the corollary of the fact that we are talking about the birthday of humanity is that the birthday in Jewish tradition is a day of introspection, is a day where we are supposed to think about how we are conducting our lives, to take stock. So birthday has this connotation of accountability, of taking stock, of reconnecting, and all those things. All of that is true about our birthdays. It's true about the birthday of humanity. So yeah, so it's absolutely the case that it's considered the birthday of humanity. If you allow also just one brief note related, which is you may have noticed or not that the Jewish New Year, so to speak, is on the first day of the seventh month. Seventh month. You would expect maybe the New Year to be the first day of the first month. Maybe you called me old-fashioned. Well, as it turns out, in the Talmud, Rosh HaShanah explains that in our tradition, we have actually 4 different Rosh HaShanahs. We have 4 different beginnings of the year. The Rosh HaShanah is the year for and everything that we need to do more on a more mundane way of doing things. But the first of Nisan is the beginning of the year for the holiday cycle, for example. And then, of course, we have the first of Elul, that is the beginning of the year. Not of course, but it's the beginning of the year for animal tithing. And we all know that there is Tu B'Shvat, that is the new year for the trees, right? The 15th month of Shvat is the new year for the trees. So we have 4 new years, depending on the different contexts of what we are talking about.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining. I will echo Sion's message here. May the upcoming year bring you health, happiness, peace, and I'm going to add security as well in these troubling times. Please do make sure to watch out for the follow-up email where you will get contact information for Rabbi Pereira, and you will also see some upcoming programs that we will have. The next one will be with Rabbi Pereira in November after the holidays. So I'm wishing everybody a Shana Tova and wonderful holiday period. Safe and healthy.
And safe and healthy for everybody, in particular our brethren in Eretz Israel.
Thank you. Wishing everybody a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.